Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Okay, you citizens of the world, I'm going to bring in our occasional co-host, Euan Hague. And Euan is a professor of geography and associate dean at DePaul. And for the past 10 years, we taught a class together. And during that class, we always would bring in the one and only Flint Taylor to talk about police torture and the murder of Fred Hampton. So I'm welcoming both Euan Hague and Flint Taylor right now. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, how are you?
Well, for the last 56 years, we've been, on this occasion, really December 4th, marking the assassination of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, who were killed by the Chicago police in cohorts with the FBI. And, Fred was a leader, a dynamic leader of the Black Panther Party. And I thought on this occasion we should talk about it. So, Flint, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about, and tell our younger listeners who Fred Hampton was and what is his legacy?
Yes, Michael, it's very important to recognize each year at this time the assassination of Fred and Mark. And Fred Hampton, as you know, and some of the older folks around know, was a young, dynamic leader, African-American leader in the community here in Chicago and out of Maywood, where he grew up, became the chairman of the Black Panther Party, which was a very radical but very committed organization, mostly of young Black youth in this city and across the country. And they were organizing, behind a 10-point program. And the 10-point program included some things that we would recognize today that actually have been implemented, like a Breakfast for Children program, for example. They also advocated for self-defense against police. And police brutality was rampant at that time in the city of Chicago, not in some ways not unlike it has been here. Most recently by the fascistic ICE and Border Patrol. And that brutality, the Panthers were arming themselves against that. But Fred and the people in the Black Panther Party were organizing coalitions. They were not just Black nationalists, quote unquote, but they talked about coalitions with radical and revolutionary white, Puerto Rican, and other organizations of color, like the Young Lords, for example, and later the Rising Up Angry, of course, and other organizations across the city. The police, of course, took much note of Fred and Mark Clark, who was the leader down in Peoria, and that's where we can take a break in the sense and in terms of this narrative and throw it back to you to see where you'd like to go from here.
I'm always struck about how young Fred Hampton was when he was assassinated. He was only 21. And I believe that, Flint, as a young law student at Northwestern University, you'd met him about 6 months previously.
Yes, that's true. I was a young law student working with the just founded People's Law Office here in Chicago. And we, among other organizations that we were representing Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party. And in October, I met Fred. I brought him to the law school, which at that time was almost completely white, male school. And I brought Fred expecting only a few of the more interested students to come. But in fact, the place was packed. And he gave this remarkable speech to the law students there in Northwestern. And what struck me at that time was basically he was my age, in fact, 2 years younger than me. and yet the charisma, the ability to speak, the ability to communicate complex and political ideology in a real way that law students on the one hand could understand, and people, regular common folk, could understand as well. And it stuck with me. What a remarkable leader he was. And I had the occasion to drive him to and from the speech. And to hear him talk in a very animated way about how the pigs, which was, of course, the common parlance at that time for the police, were after him, and they were surveilling him, and all of that. And as a rather naive 23-year-old law student at that time, I thought he was a little bit paranoid. And then less than 2 months later, I was at 2337 West Monroe Street early in the morning of December 4th, and had been called by the lawyers I was working with, and I was standing in his blood because he and Mark Clark had been assassinated, as it has subsequently been proven by the Chicago police in a conspiracy with the FBI and the state's attorney, the head prosecutor here in Cook County, had in fact, with the police and with the FBI, conspired to assassinate him, and then to attempt to weave a cover-up to say that it was a shootout with the Panthers, when in fact, because we had gone there and the police had left the apartment open, that we were able to show that it wasn't a shootout in any respect, that all the bullets, but save one, were going into the apartment, tiny little apartment, headed towards that back bedroom that Fred Hampton was asleep in, and that we were also able to show later that he was drugged by an informant of the FBI.
Yeah, and I think if at the time, didn't the police reenact this mythical shootout on television?
Well, yes, there was a media frenzy back in the day. There were 4 daily newspapers, and the local TV stations had, that's where you got your news, basically. And Hanrahan, the state's attorney, after staging a press conference right after the event, where he called it a shootout and decried the vicious Black Panthers, we were able to show the media, in fact, what had really happened. So Hanrahan went on the defensive, and he staged not only a reenactment, where they built a little framed replica of the apartment and had the cops who raided the apartment act out the lies that they said and told about the assassination itself. But he also did an exclusive with the very conservative Chicago Tribune. And that exclusive, of course, was on the front page in blazing headlines. Exclusive, police tell what happened. And in that exclusive, which of course were the same set of lies that were shown on TV after about 7 retakes to try to get these cops on the same page with each other, the exclusive showed some pictures. And they were police pictures that Hanrahan had taken, and he gave them to the Tribune. And on the front page, these pictures supposedly depicted bullet holes in the back door, which they attributed to Fred Hampton. One of the big lies was that Fred, who actually was drugged so he couldn't fight back, had stood up with a .45 in the back bedroom and started firing at the police. Well, okay, to support that, they circled what they said were some bullet holes in the back door, which supposedly Hampton fired. And they also took another picture, and they were saying that other Panthers were firing from the middle bedroom. And here was a bullet-riddled door from where the Panthers were firing out of that bedroom. Well, it didn't take us very long, having been there and working in the apartment, to see that these were both lies. The back bedroom or the back door, the circles were not around bullet holes; they were around nail heads. We were able to show that, and the door that they said the Panthers had riddled was in fact a door that we could show the machine gun bullets that Machine Gun Joe Gorman had fired at the apartment. Those were police bullets. So the next day, the Chicago Sun-Times, one of the competing newspapers then and now, was able to expose the exclusive as being a bald-faced lie orchestrated by the state's attorney, Ed Hanrahan.
Let me jump in and ask. I know I want to hear a little bit about the trial and other things, but it occurs to me that I'm going to ask you, what do you think the effect of the assassination of Fred was on the movement? I mean, we all kind of valiantly want to carry on, but it really was a very challenging situation.
Well, that's a somewhat complicated question, Michael, and you know that as being a young leader in the movement at that time. To arm against the police, to fight against the police, is a noble, particularly at that time, what was going on was a noble platform in the Panthers, and particularly Fred. They stood behind what they preached. But on the other hand, they were young people, idealistic people, movement people, some of whom were as young as 17 and 18 years old, two of the young women in the apartment who got shot. So to live through this event was not only harrowing for the people who were involved, but it was symbolic to the movement in general. And on the one hand, it made, quite rightly, a martyr out of Fred Hampton and a martyr out of Mark Clark. And it gave a cause for people to get behind. And to this very day, we talk about it. And to this very day, he is a symbol that is people organize around. So in that sense, it's profound in a very, I guess say, positive way, but in a way of intimidating. Maybe that's not the right word, but causing people to think twice before they joined a radical movement, before they organized around principles that were right, but perhaps not obtainable in the short term, and that the repercussions of such rhetoric and such organizing would lead to what happened at 4 a.m. On December 4th to one of the brightest young leaders, black leaders in the entire country, is something that had a negative effect in terms of organizing for the Panthers, certainly. So it had both impacts, but the long-lasting historical impact is what we're sitting here today, 56 years later, talking about. Not unlike talking about Malcolm X and what he meant and who he was, and not unlike at all talking about Dr. King and what he meant and what the movement that he led it was all about, and what we can do today to continue what those young leaders and those important organizations were pioneers of back in the day.
Mhm. And much of the narrative that we know today came through the trials and court cases that you were involved in over, I think, a dozen or so years, trying to demonstrate that this was an assassination and not a shootout. I was wondering if you just talk us a little bit about the subsequent trials and some of the key evidence and some of the key points that you were able to demonstrate in court showed that the Chicago police and the FBI had been involved.
Sure. As I mentioned, when Fred was murdered, I was a second-year law student, but I was able to work from the Jump Street from that morning on December 4th in that apartment on the case of the murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark for the next 13 years. And I'd like to say that as my first trial as a lawyer, it lasted 18 months because I became a lawyer. We were working on a civil rights case after the Panthers were shot up. Hanrahan charged all of them with attempted murder, quite ironically. But because of the evidence that was uncovered and the lies, he had to drop the case. Ultimately, the feds came in and did a cover-up investigation. It was the era of Nixon and John Mitchell, the U.S. The head of justice, with quotes, the government, found that, in fact, there was 90 bullets fired by the police and one by the Panthers, but wouldn't and didn't indict anybody because they knew what we didn't know, which was that there was an FBI informant provocateur behind this whole thing by the name of William O'Neill, and he was working for the FBI and the FBI's secret COINTELPRO program. Well, all of this was quite secret as we started out our lawsuit. But as we dug into the case, and after certain events happened in the broader public sphere, such as Watergate, we were able to marshal together this evidence, uncover much of it, that there was a floor plan, that there was also that O'Neill drew, and that they spotted exactly on this floor plan where Fred would be sleeping. And this was given to the raiders, and this led to the raid. And so during this 18 months of trial, we were able to uncover this evidence, what we would call the trilogy of FBI documents, that being the floor plan that I mentioned, that being a document that showed that it was part of this illegal COINTELPRO program of the FBI, and what we called the bonus document, which was a document which, after the fact, Hoover and the people in Washington and here in Chicago and the FBI took credit for the raid itself and gave William O'Neill, the informant, a provocateur, who had worked as one of the pallbearers in Fred Hampton's funeral. He also, of course, set up the raid. They gave him his 30 pieces of silver, which was a $300 bonus. So this trilogy established that it was, in fact, a political assassination orchestrated in Washington.
Flint, there are a couple of movies out about the Black Panther, about Fred Hampton. One is by Howard Alk and the film group. It's a documentary called The Murder of Fred Hampton. I recommend that real highly. There's also a Hollywood movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, which I've heard a number of Panthers criticize. It certainly is not accurate, but I felt it did show sympathy for the cause. Any comment quickly on that?
Sure. Mike Gray and Howard Alk were at the apartment on December 4th. They were part of the team that we put together, and they were making a movie about the coalition and Fred Hampton and what a great leader he was. And after he was assassinated, they had the footage that made the murder of Fred Hampton. And it's a remarkable movie, got awards at CAN, and Came out in 1971. There was the next piece that came out was something called Eyes on the Prize. And it was Eyes on the Prize 2. It came out in 1991, just about the time that O'Neill committed suicide. And it put together all the evidence that we and others had accumulated during the trial and put forth the evidence of the assassination and the conspiracy to murder. And then, of course, along came Judas and the Black Messiah. And people who are close to Fred, close to the events and to the evidence, had criticisms of it. And you mentioned them, Mike, generally speaking. And in fact, ironically, the great actors who depicted Fred Hampton, for example, were not as powerful as Fred Hampton himself was, as you can see when you compare it to The Murder of Fred Hampton, which has all this footage of Fred himself making speeches. The depiction of, and of course I knew all of these folks, and I sat in a small room participating in the questioning of O'Neill during our trials on several occasions. And the actor who acted the role of O'Neill was chillingly accurate, and from my firsthand experience. And they said that he had to go through therapy to actually act out O'Neill and the fact of him being a snitch. So the movie has its faults, but it also brings to the public the reality of the FBI COINTELPRO program assassination.
Flint, I want to thank you for joining us.